President Trump is back in the U.S., there's renewed focus on the domestic agenda. For more on the president's budget plan and plans for tax reform, let's bring in Grover Norquist, Super Grover. That's taken, I think, Grover, but I always use it for you. President of Americans for Tax Reform. And just hearing your title and reading the lead story in the Wall Street Journal, your entire life, you're the president of an organization that is for tax reform, and it's not working. It's not happening. I'm reading this in the journal. Did you read this? Let me just read it real quick to you, Grover. The GOP bid to rewrite the tax code falters. The boldest ideas for changing the tax code are either dead or on political life support. The clear winner is the status quo. I mean, that's what you wake up to this morning as the president of Americans' tax reform. And you want to, I mean, that's depressing, is it not?
No. The one thing that isn't going to happen is the status quo continuing. The consensus in the House, the Senate, and the White House is fairly broad. You're going to read 6, count them, 6 headlines like that between now and when we radically reform the tax code. There's a consensus to go to 15 or 20 on the corporate rate. There's a consensus that subchapter S corporations, pass-through companies, will also get 15 or 20% as well, maybe a little bounce there. But that's the first time we've tied business income paid through the personal income tax to business income in corporations. There's an agreement to kill the death tax. There's no disagreement there. There's an agreement to get rid of the alternative minimum tax. And what you're having debates on now is what about the border adjustability on the corporate income tax? Do we go to full business expensing? Some in the Senate have only said partial. I think partial is a mistake. It's like cutting crabgrass instead of pulling it out. We need to go to full and immediate business expensing to lower the cost of capital for new investment. But that's a debated point right now. And on the individual side, you're looking at slightly lower marginal tax rates, not as large cuts as the corporate side, but also increasing the personal and family exemption. So within that list that I just went through, there you have agreement. Outside of that, think of it as 3 circles coming together with a Venn diagram overlap. The overlap is worth having and is a very good step forward. It can get larger, I hope, as we move forward.
Right in the article, it says they're searching for ways to offset the deep rate cuts they desire, and it points out that a lot of the ways to offset them aren't going to come about. And I can just tell you that long-time deficit hawks, like the Democrats and Andrew and others that have always never wanted to do any to grow the deficit, they're not going to go along with this. If you don't, you're going to do, you know what this is going to be? Voodoo economics. That's the only way you're going to get this is by dynamic scoring, which, as they'll tell you, that never works. And the long-term growth potential of the United States is only 2%. So these assumptions for 3 and that there'll be any type of benefit from this is not going to happen, and you're just going to add to the deficit. And that's the plan we're going to get, right?
Okay. At the end of every failed Democratic presidency, Carter's and Obama's, where they massively ramped up the deficit and spent a great deal of money and didn't care about the deficit when they were spending, then they decided that they cared about the deficit in order to not lower taxes on working men and women in the United States. Carter took that position. Obama took that position. And then each of them at the end of their term said, you know this lousy growth rate we have? That's not me. That's the world. The problem is, if you look at Obama's 8 years and compare American growth rate versus the European growth rate, for the first 6 years, we were growing faster after the bottom out of the recession. It's in the last year and a half, we're growing slower than Europe. Slower than Europe is not where you want to be. The reason we've done better is that over 100 years, we've grown faster than Europe. And we are now, thanks to the last year of the Obama administration and the first bit of this administration, we're behind European growth rates. So the idea that our lousy growth rate over the last 8 years is some new normal, that's an effort to cover up failure. And we do need to go back to the policies that Reagan did, which got you 4% growth. All of a sudden, 4% growth was possible if you cut marginal tax rates and deregulated. And while we look at tax reform, a lot of the initial growth we're going to be getting over the next couple of years comes from allowing permits for pipelines. There'd been a war on infrastructure for 8 years in this country, stopping the permitting process for power plants and for pipelines and so on, that's beginning to be over.
When it's all said and done, just going back to, I was kind of kidding about it, but will any of it, will any of it be offset? Will any of it be paid for? And how do you get Republicans, these guys that haven't governed for 8 years, all they know how to do is oppose things? I mean, really, watching this, I have serious doubts whether they actually can govern at this point. How do they get together and actually pass something when they, you got McCain. He's a Republican, really? I mean, how are you going to get people on board for this when there's just going to be an onslaught from mainstream media and everybody else about how bad this is going to be?
Well, you're quite right. Don't watch it. You'll get depressed because there'll be headlines all the time about everything falling apart until it comes together. Again, there's a great deal of agreement. I went through sort of at the beginning the list of things that each of the Republicans in the House, Senate, and the presidency agree on. Don't get distracted by asking what the Democrats want. No matter what compromises are made, there'll not be a single Democrat vote in the House or the Senate for this tax reform and tax reduction. But we'll also extend the length of time that you measure from 10 years, used to be 5, then it moved to 10. I think we'll move it out to 20, and that allows you a lot more freedom in reducing tax rates for a 20-year period, and you don't have to have quite the same offsets.
Wow. I can't believe how optimistic you are.
I
can't believe how optimistic you are.
I am. I think things are going well. I'd have preferred if we'd passed health care sooner to pick up the pace, but we'll get this year, October.
Well, I guess you're not reading the papers because Russia is, nothing's going to happen until we get that settled. Anyway.